Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome NBA fans to today's video where I'll present my pick for the 24-25 NBA championship contender. Obviously, there are many favorite teams like Denver Nuggets, Boston Celtics, and now the New York Knicks are building an interesting project, to be honest. Among other great teams, Minnesota was a contender, but with recent losses, well, that's another story. I'd like to share my personal pick for this year's clear championship contender. Now, I'm not saying they're the favorite, but I think this is a team worth watching closely. They're generally fun to watch, have some interesting players, and I believe they could surprise us. And yes, I'm talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. Their project seems extraordinary to me, and for some reason, it's been an unfairly criticized franchise. Personally, I think it's a project where you have the league's best center, no doubt. Yes, there are playoff and injury issues, but setting those aside, there's no better center than Joel Embiid. Now you have a point guard like Maxey. I won't compare him to Kyrie Irving, but he has great handles, a good three-point shot, and in crucial moments, he's a player who can drop 40 points in a game. It's not his average, but he is consistent in scoring. He's not the type who has one great game and then disappears for three. He's a player who regularly maintains a steady scoring output. To me, he's an underrated point guard who deserves more recognition. And the cherry on top, one of the reinforcements this team made he seems ideal, perfect from head to toe. Paul George, a forward that I think this team needed. They needed a player who could defend, organize, attack, shoot, a very complete player. I know he hasn't had his best time with the LA Clippers, but I wouldn't want to limit his evaluation to just his Clippers era. Sure, it's true that with the Clippers, he's had injury issues and never been part of a championship contender team alongside Kawhi Leonard. But the reality is that the Clippers situation has been more about big names than having a coach who could give the team direction. Now in Philly, there's a leader in Joel Embiid, a point guard in Maxey, and now a top-tier forward in Paul George. I actually follow Paul George's podcast often and always hear him praising Joel Embiid, who he greatly admires. He thinks he's the league's best player, similar to Shaq, but more well-rounded. We're talking about a player who greatly admires and respects Philly's top star. This is crucial to understand. There won't be ego issues between them. Paul George knows he's the team's second most important player. Max Eid is aware that Paul George is an NBA superstar, likely Hall of Famer. We'll see how that plays out. But that's the current expectation. Honestly, my only concern with the Clippers is their rotation depth. The bench isn't bad, but I don't see a sixth man of the year candidate. That's where they might need to look for reinforcements. I'd suggest scouting the G League for any standout players to add. Try to achieve it, but I insist this team is a clear championship contender. In fact, if I had to make a prediction, I think in the next 6 months of the season, barring any injury to Embiid, I believe Embiid will be the NBA's number one MVP candidate. Last year's situation makes me laugh, which is why I don't get the criticism of the Sixers and Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid was healthy for about 6 months. He was the MVP frontrunner, set to repeat, and without injury, he'd be the in fact, his MVP season was so outstanding he had a 72-point game, the fourth highest score in league history behind Luka Doncic, Kobe Bryant, and Wilt Chamberlain's 100. If you had a player who started the season as the top MVP candidate, and then Max had a season where he led the team to the playoffs, but in BitLab he's not at his best for playoffs, that's another issue. I think they should develop a plan where Envita gets more rest. And maybe this means he won't win MVP, but he's already got one. I think it's time to prioritize, take better care of his body, and aim to be not 100% for playoffs, because I doubt anyone's 100% for playoffs. But if he was at 40, 30, or 20%, try to get that up to 70 to 80%. In fact, some players like Jimmy Butler hit their peak in playoffs despite an irregular season. We see them perform at a much higher level. Considering this, it's crucial to strategize how to manage the Philadelphia 76 ERs and Joel Embiid throughout the season. As I mentioned, this team is going to be incredibly exciting to watch. I became a huge fan of this team with James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, and Embiid. Their trio fascinated me. They even reached the conference finals. They competed well against the Celtics without Maxey and Embiid, who were injured. Harden alone, who I believe is vastly underrated by NBA fans, held his own. I'll dedicate a video to NBA fans about this topic soon. I think many overrated players are unfairly criticized while others receive too much praise. But hey, back to the topic. The truth is, I know the Sixers are a team that plays in a really fun, exciting way. They always come to compete, and their home court is incredible. Now, seeing them with Paul George, I hope his injury issues won't be too serious. I get that there needs to be some rest, and I know these injuries are sometimes used as a way for players to get a bit of a breather, which I don't think is bad, just as long as it doesn't turn into a year-long injury situation. I think Embiid and Paul George need to work together in the sense of, okay, it's your turn to lead the team, give me some minutes to rest, not pushing their bodies to the limit, neither one of them, since he's a very young player, and I don't think this should be an issue. But if we need to focus a bit on the problem, I'll probably see most of it in the comments. Most people will probably say, you haven't seen Embiid in the playoffs. I've seen Embiid in playoffs, and they're right. He's one of the worst. He's the biggest downgrade in the league, in my opinion. It's the sharpest decline of a player. And why is that? Well, I'd say it's because he's one of the tallest and heaviest players in the league, requiring a lot of energy. And I'm very surprised by the sudden change. Moreover, I dare suggest the Sixers admit Embiid has a 3 week muscle injury. Before the playoffs, he should rest or play minimal minutes, then enter the playoffs fresh like it's season start for Envit. Envit starts the season scoring 40, 40, 40, 36 points, but come playoff time and he can't move. His knees hurt, he looks tired and worn out. In fact, during these playoffs, he had an eye allergy and couldn't see. This guy just has all sorts of issues in the playoffs. Paul George is another player who needs to step up in the playoffs. It's time for redemption. You're not on a bad team. It's not just you and Joel Embiid. There's also Theresa Maxey. I think there's a solid roster that can compete. Take care of yourself, put in the work, and I believe these three players need a title. Envy, I think, will silence many critics when he wins the NBA championship because I think he's a player who is unfairly underrated. As I mentioned, people always try to diminish his game, his MVP, his seasons. It's infuriating that he's one of the best players in the league. I honestly don't understand why. If he wore a Lakers or Knicks jersey, people would be praising him nonstop as the best center, the new Shaquille O'Neal. But we know how fans are. Your skill doesn't depend on the jersey you wear, right? I also believe Paul George needs a title to make the NBA Hall of Fame. I think Joel Embiid maybe has it more guaranteed by his MVP, and obviously the Sixers will re sign him. But you need that championship to make it indisputable. The Paul George debate is arguable, and I would honestly love to read in the comments what the average fan thinks about this. Whether Paul George is a Hall of Famer or not, and then Max Eto'o is young, but honestly, I can't see him being the Sixers superstar who will win many championships. So this issue is like saying, take advantage of these two now. Who knows what the future holds? Give your best, prove you're at their level, and when they're gone, you'll be the face of the Sixers. He's got the talent. Actually, with Max Ito, when I watch him play, he reminds me of Kyrie, very similar to Kiri, but maybe calmer in his game. Not as aggressive shooting, a bit smarter in decision making. Maybe because he's not as good as Kyrie Irving, but I see that potential. He's just a bit more analytical in his it's decision time. But hey, NBA fans, I'd love to read in the comments what you think. Am I overhyping the Sixers' championship chances? I know there's the injury factor and great teams like the Celtics who are probably the favorites. I'd like to make a video about them, thinking they might become a dynasty. Not sure about back-to-back titles, but I'm certain if they keep 70% of their roster for 6, 7 years, we'll see at least 3 championships from the Celtics. That's all from me. Enjoyed making this video. Have a great day. Bye bye.